This podcast has been brought to you by Podcast Nation.
Men experience the same types of hormone fluctuations and body changes. It's just in society, men age more gracefully and women have it harder. So
You do. And I will fully acknowledge
we're
that.
going to get into menopause next time.
Yes.
I love it.
100%.
We'll do it live. Fuck it.
You're listening to the Laughing Couple podcast with your hosts, Brittany and Ryan Ostafy. Join them weekly as they discuss topics such as relationships, kids, sex, parenting, all unfiltered and all with a healthy dose of laughter. Please welcome your hosts, Brittany and Ryan Ostafy.
Okay. Hi, we have such an awesome episode today. We have Jessica Drake here. If you don't know who that is, just do a quick Google search, then come back and enjoy because this episode is going to be so educational and so interesting. Jessica, you look so beautiful. Like, it's actually not fair. I feel like I was expecting you to show up and be like, oh, you look so beautiful.
It's a ring light.
No, it's not. It's you. You are beautiful. Okay, so can you do a quick edification of yourself, who you are in the community, just in case people don't know who you are, even though I know everyone just Googled you, but I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so if you're doing just a Google search on me, your search results are going to bring you a very wide range of who I am and what I am. And it's really hard to narrow it down to a short bio, but my name is Jessica Drake. I have been in the adult industry for longer than 20 years. I started as an adult performer and then moved on to writing and directing and producing. From there, I became a certified sex educator. I became the brand strategist for Wicked Sensual Care, which is an occupation that I am still doing to this day. Also, I am doing marketing and product development for Wicked Sensual Care. And I'm still, in the meantime, also being an independent content creator, doing appearances, teaching classes, teaching workshops, doing trainings for Wicked Sensual Care, and feature dancing, which I have a lot of coming up lately. So I wear a lot of hats, and that's me in a nutshell.
You are a humble badass.
Oh, that's true.
That's what I was about. That's what I was about to say.
I'm going to put that in my bio.
Humble badass.
A humble badass, because you've done a wonderful job of giving a very brief overview of your career. But I don't think people fully understand the magnitude that you have had in the industry, and the changes that you have made in the industry, and the changes that you have made for yourself, and the contribution that you are now providing this community. I say you are a humble badass.
I love it.
That is very kind. I like that phrase a lot. Thank you. When I got into the industry, it was always important to me because I made such an informed decision about what getting into the industry would mean to me and the people that I was surrounded with and maybe wouldn't be surrounded with forever. I made up my mind to choose a very clear trajectory for my career. And it was never my intent to be a performer, and that was it. So as soon as I got in, I was always very curious. Some might say nosy. I wanted to know, well, why do we do it that way? And why is the camera here? And why are you lighting it this way? And I wanted to know all of the things. And then I was fortunate enough to have a contract for quite a while with an amazing company, until they were sold at the beginning of COVID. But they were amazing. And they granted me so much freedom in creativity. So if I didn't like a script, I could turn it down. I always had 100% control with who I worked with in every movie. I was a condom only performer by choice. Like that was just what was right for me. And so very quickly I knew, well, I'd love to write. Like, let me write a couple movies and give them to someone else to direct them, and we'll see what happens. It was so much fun to be that much a part of the creative process, but also I wanted to do it the way I wanted to do it. Yeah. So the first movie that I directed solo was a project called 3 Days in June. And I wrote it, directed it, starred in it. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was also super rewarding because when you're sitting in an edit bay with an editor and you're choosing music for different scenes and you're helping, with your choice and edit, you're like, oh, I had so much influence over this. So directing feature movies is what led me into creating a line of educational movies, because at the same time that I was directing and writing and producing, I was also on the path to become a certified sex educator. And I really wanted to just bring that all together. And I knew that there weren't very many resources for people in judgmental sex education. So I created explicit how-tos, and I did 14 volumes, and the most popular are senior sex, plus size sex, anal, of course, like that's a go-to Obviously. For so many people, and BDSM for beginners. So I think those are the things as far as like producing from an educational standpoint that I'm most proud of. Yeah. And then things really changed, of course, like they did for the entire world at the beginning of COVID. The company I was contracted to sold. So I started focusing more on wicked sensual care, and I was focusing more on independent content creation because the bigger studios weren't shooting. And I think that was actually a very redefining point in my career. I was a little bit forced into it, but at the same time, it's like, oh, well, this is what life is handing me right now. This is the direction I'm going to go. How can I make this work for me? And how do I do this on my terms? Also, I came out of a 16-year relationship at the beginning of COVID as well. So it was almost like a reinvention of sorts.
Yeah. Okay. So can we briefly talk about, this wasn't in my list, but hearing you talk about writing and directing like a movie, I have two questions. One, when you were working, did you find that you were more comfortable on set with a female director, or did you find that like another female is more comfortable with you as the director? Just coming from like personally, like as a woman, I would be way more comfortable with another woman. There's just something about like a safe space, I would almost feel.
Yeah. So that is a fantastic question. I had a lot of talent tell me that they loved working for me, but I think it had less to do, it's really hard to say. I think it had less to do with the fact that I'm a woman and more to do with the fact that I very strongly believe that we should just treat people the way that we want to be treated. So the way that would translate to me being a director is, and some of this is going to seem very obvious to y'all, but in the adult industry, sometimes it doesn't happen. I would pay my performers very fairly. I would ask them, well, what's your day rate? And then they would tell me, and I would say, I'd like to offer you $100 more than that. And this is why. And I would tell them, everything that they were going to expect during their day. I feed them really well on set. I think it's super important to fuel your body when you're tackling a project like that. Always communicating with them, always saying, in this space, you are the boss here, not me. You have the ability to call cut if you're uncomfortable or if you change your mind about a thing, or if you're doing an interview and you say something that you don't mean to say, we can reel it back. Like, you are the bosses here. So talent loved working for me because of that. But I have to say that along the way, during my time in the industry, I did work for some directors who were men who were also good. And I did have some experiences on set with male directors that were not fantastic.
Right.
So it's probably a little bit of both. I think also women can relate to women maybe a little bit more when they're having an off day on set, where I have been encouraged by a male director to just suck it up and get it done, you know?
Figuratively and literally, because that's what assholes would say.
I love bringing out the best in people. I love facilitating a really good experience. Like, if you're going to be having sex on camera, it should be good to you. It should feel good to you. You know, I mean, yes, it's still a job at the end of the day. And sometimes you don't feel like going to work.
Right.
You know, you have maybe a lot of stuff going on in your personal life, or your body's just not cooperating or something like that. But for the most part, like, we should be enjoying what we do, and we should be comfortable and having a good time. So I think that's why people enjoy me as a director.
You have a second part to the question.
I do. It's aligned, but it's kind of different. I feel like I have so much to say. I don't even
Brittany does not want me to be here today. And that's fine. That's fine. I'll be honest.
Okay.
It's fine.
So I love to read. Like, I'm a huge reader. I run 2 book clubs. And I do love spicy like books. I really love spicy books. But like well-written ones. So I'm just so curious. I feel like writing a script would feel like so empowering. It would be so intriguing, because it's almost like you could take your own like fantasies, especially as you get older, like they'll change and they'll adapt, and to be able to be like, I get to write this. I feel like that would just be so liberating to be the writer and then like see it play out. Am I a dork for thinking this? I just think that's awesome.
So the more I got into the directing side and the writing side, and I mean, even the longer I had been contracted to the company, I absolutely spent a good number of years living out my sexual fantasies as they evolved.
Yeah.
I really had the luxury and the privilege of doing it in a safe, controlled environment under my terms. Everything was based, you know, of course, based around consent. And, you know, we would talk about what could happen, what couldn't happen. But yeah, I put myself in some really awesome situations.
I just think that's amazing.
It's true. You're absolutely right. It works that way.
So Jessica, you've talked a couple of times. I think I've heard it at least 3 times, but maybe 4 times today, about doing things on your own terms. And being empowered to take control of your environment. The industry, the adult industry, the porn industry has changed. It's evolved. You made a comment about COVID changing everything. Do you find now, particularly as a woman who has experienced one side of the equation and now this other side, do you find now with the invention and the creation of things like OnlyFans, where the person in front of the camera is now in complete control, do you feel like this has evolved into a stage where it's going to be less, I don't even know how to describe it. It's being in control of of who you are, who you talk to. I don't even know where to go with this question. I just feel like there's an evolution that's happened as a female empowerment. Women are making more money today, in charge of their destiny, in charge of what they put out there. What is that like to transition and to see that and to know that you are someone who has actually guided this process?
Yeah, I love that question. And it's a little complex, because I come from a time, I did my first movie at the end of 1999, y'all. The industry was so different then. It was very much run by men, but at the same time, the performers had a lot of control because it wasn't a big business back then. I mean, it was big business monetarily, but it wasn't as big of a business in number of performers because it was still pretty taboo. You know, you wouldn't want people to find out. Back then, you would think that you could still hide it. That was not the case. But performers had a lot of control back then with what we were doing, who we were doing it with, and everything like that. As the years went on and technology advanced and then piracy came in and like basically took out the industry, we also simultaneously, because of the internet, had an influx of performers who were just showing up from all ends of the earth and just working for anyone because they didn't know any better. So the industry as a whole took a huge hit during that time as internet companies started to profit so much off of the work of particularly new performers who weren't really informed and didn't know any better. And so there's this time that was I feel it was very disempowering to not just women in the industry, but men as well. And so I think the industry was sort of trying to police itself and sort of trying to reevaluate what was going on and how we could prevent these things from happening and empower performers again when COVID struck. And when COVID struck and all the big studios shut down, you had so many performers that were completely out of work. And I think although OnlyFans existed before COVID, OnlyFans was around years before COVID.
Was it really?
Of course, that's when OnlyFans and Loyal Fans and all the other platforms that enable content creators to, you know, do it all for themselves. Of course, that's when it really took off. For me, coming from such a big studio with big budgets and huge sets and a week-long movie or a 2-week-long movie and 50 to 100 pages of dialogue, to suddenly be by myself in a room. And luckily I understood lighting a bit because of the directing experience. But I'm like ordering equipment off of Amazon. I'm creating my own content in a time where I think, at least at first during COVID, like everybody was so scared. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't know how long it was going to last. So I was shooting a lot of my own content, but not happily, like in the beginning, not happily. But as time wore on, I got to see other performers that were catering to their fan base and just growing so much and profiting so much off of, like you said, doing what they want to do with who they want to do it with and not having to answer to a big studio or not being mistreated on set or by a director or, you know, whatever. They could just do things on their own terms. And the other thing that we really noticed is that it made space for all types of people to engage with fans on a very personal level. So mainstream porn studios, sometimes, not all of them, but some of them would say, oh, we wouldn't shoot trans scenes, or, you know, we're going to shoot a lot of interracial, but do it in a way that it really fetishizes the people. And now performers were able to do whatever they wanted and reach their fan base without being censored by mainstream porn. So it can be a very profitable, lucrative thing to do. And it isn't easy. I want to say both of those things at the same time, because we also have people coming in going, oh, I'm just going to do an OnlyFans. Oh, I'm just going to have an OnlyFans and not show my face or only show my feet or just eat all day on my OnlyFans. And that's all I'm going to do. And anybody who's ever been an independent content creator will say it's work. It's still so much work, but it's good.
Okay. Let's talk about lube because I personally, like, I feel like maybe we just, as your body changes, well, you for sure know this, because you talk a lot about perimenopause, and we've had so many questions from our community about perimenopause. So I guess what I would say is, let's start from the beginning. Were there any specific signs that you were like, I'm probably going through perimenopause, when it came to like sexuality? Like, what were there signs where you were like, oh man, is this what this is? And did you find a lack of resource? Like, cause I find there aren't a lot, but they're becoming more.
Yes. So for me and my own personal experience, I had no idea at the time. I never connected any kind of dots. So if folks are watching or listening to this right now, I think I should say, hey, I'm currently experiencing perimenopause. In the beginning, though, and I would say that it was even happening in my late 30s, stuff just wasn't right with me. Like sex felt different. My sex drive was all over the place, and I attribute it to all kinds of things, to stress, to my relationship at the time. But I knew that there was something going on with my body. And I had a doctor that was super dismissive, and they said, well, you're not having hot flashes and you're so young and you're still having regular periods. I'm still having regular periods. And so I wasn't really getting any answers. And so I let it go. And what really ended up happening is that the last educational that I shot was right before COVID. I did senior sex. I collaborated with the amazing Joan Price, who is a famous author, a senior sex expert, and a really good friend of mine. And so we made this movie, Jessica Drake's Guide to Wicked Sex, Senior Sex Edition. And I mean, it won so many awards. It got so much attention. It got so much media coverage. It really forwarded the conversation about sex and aging. And then people started saying, mostly to Joan, but they started saying, well, what lubes do you recommend? Like, what's a better lube to use as we're experiencing these things like vaginal dryness and it like lack of lubrication, but also exterior vaginal dryness. And so I started thinking, well, maybe we make a lubricant for people who are getting older and experiencing a very specific set of symptoms or issues. And that went into formulation, and that was the beginning of the timeless line. But in meeting with chemists and doing all the research and doing a survey about menopause for so long, like really doing all this research, I realized that it wasn't one lube that was necessary. It was going to be a whole line in order to give people choices, because all bodies are different and everyone's preferences are different. So in doing all of this research into symptoms of perimenopause, really quirkier, smaller things that often go unnoticed, like a different type of headache or ringing in the ears, or there's just so many small different symptoms. I went, hold on, is this me? And it was really an aha moment. And when that was happening, the more research, and there's not enough research out there, but the more research I was doing, it was so relatable to me. So as the timeless line was being formulated, I was going through all of this at the same time and working on finding a doctor that would listen to me. And I found one. And I mean, it's just given way to like an avalanche of information that's coming out. And we are not just targeting people who are experiencing menopause and beyond, but we make perimenopause such a big part of it because it's that gray area that goes so unnoticed and so dismissed. And whenever I'm doing a training or like speaking at a conference or demoing it at like a trade show within our industry, and I'm explaining it to people and I'm talking about the supportive ingredients and why we believe in it so much, I would say 8 or 9 times out of 10, a woman will lean into me and go, I'm in perimenopause. It's just opening up the door for great conversations. So
Yeah. I, honest to God, had not even heard of perimenopause until I think I jumped on Instagram one day and I was like, I have the most insane insomnia and I've never, like, I have 2 young kids. I'm like, why the fuck do I have heart? Like, why am I not sleeping? Like, I'm tired. Do you know what I mean? And then everyone was like, it's perimenopause. I was like, I don't know what this is. And so what would you suggest would be like, would you say, hey, if you're experiencing perimenopause, I would use this product because it helps with X. Like how do the lubes help with that? Like what are the differences in like sex when you go through perimenopause?
So to people that are thinking that they're experiencing perimenopause, my recommendations as far as products go would be more of an individual preference. In the Timeless line, we have Timeless Aqua, a water-based with a really silky feel. And we also have Timeless Aqua Gel. So it's a bit of a thicker viscosity. And the supportive ingredients in those are squalane, vitamin E, aloe, sodium hyaluronate, which is a derivative of hyaluronic acid. It penetrates the skin deeper, providing more hydration, more moisture, and really combating vaginal dryness. Some people like a hybrid because it's a cross between a water base, so you get the benefits of a water base, which easy to clean up. It's good for all types of play. But there's also a small percentage of silicone. So if you're one of those people who prefers a hybrid lube and you're also experiencing perimenopause, or you just want additional moisture, hydration, something that's going to last a lot longer, Timeless Hybrid would be a great choice. Again, with all of the same supportive ingredients. I'm also a silicone lover. So I would say Timeless silicone is really great. Because it's a silicone formula, it is really long lasting. It's great for water play. It is not good for silicone toys. And it's a bit of an effort to clean up. But ours is enriched with vitamin E and squalane. And it just gives a really nourishing feel afterwards. So we have 4 formulas. It's definitely based on individual preference. And I also have to say that, you know, I was in the business for years before I realized, hey, I don't have to have one lube for every type of sex that I'm having.
So I have 2 questions because number one,
because I've been monopolizing this whole interview.
No, it's okay. No, because it's important. It's important. Like we always talk about one side of the hand and the other side of the hand. The one side of the hand is the female who's experiencing perimenopause. The other side of the hand is the man who doesn't understand perimenopause.
That's true.
And so it's important to know a lot of couples struggle as they've been a couple for some time, leading into their late 30s, early 40s, you see divorce rates skyrocket, and sex is the number one cause for divorce. And so there is an opportunity here to have a conversation around perimenopause and how it affects sex so that we, on the other side of the equation, can support effectively, number one. And then number two, my question would be, and we can kind of put them together, there's this preconceived notion, especially in your 20s and early 30s, that you shouldn't need lube, right? And lube is one of those things that people take because, oh, it's not working effectively, when in fact, that is completely incorrect. So I'd like to talk really carefully about, or I'd like to talk about how we as men can support, or women who are supporting their partner who's a woman who's going through perimenopause. How do we support that change? How do we have a conversation around that change? And then let's tackle the idea of porn being, or of lube being bad.
And like without making the male wrong, like, you know, or the female wrong. Like it's like, well, you're not wet. Is that because I'm not making you turn on? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? Like it's just like genetically and scientifically changing.
I don't want my wife to have painful sex, and I want her to be able to tell me that she's having painful sex, and I want her to be able to lean into something like a lubricant that doesn't make her wrong and doesn't make me wrong.
Yeah.
I love that. So it all starts with, and I know that y'all already know this, and probably a lot of your listeners and viewers know this. It really is about communication.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about communication, and it has to go both ways. And when you're talking about like a drop in libido from either partner or some type of a breakdown in the relationship, sometimes people don't even acknowledge it to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
They'll just let it go. And then when people let it go, they sort of mentally and emotionally check out of the relationship. They're not investing the time and the effort because they don't want those awkward conversations. But let me tell you, the longer that you wait, the more awkward the conversation will be,
right.
And the more likely it is that it will just never happen. So if you're with someone who may be experiencing perimenopause, I think the thing not to do is say, do you think you're experiencing perimenopause?
Yeah.
Is this menopause? And only because in society, there's still such a stigma around it that we're working against today. Like every day we're working against the stigma. And there's not a lot of information, and there aren't a lot of doctors who are super supportive when a woman in her 30s, mid-30s, early 30s, late 30s comes in with some things that they're concerned with.
Yeah.
Most doctors are not talking about it. So if partners could say things like, I noticed we're not having sex as much as we used to. What can I do to bring that back? Or is there something that you need from me? Or do you want to talk about it? Or are you noticing that too? Like have a gateway conversation, maybe towards a bigger conversation. And just know that your partner who may be experiencing perimenopause might not know, might be in denial, might be ashamed, might be trying to hide it because of there's still, it's still very taboo. And, when we were growing up, I think it was talked about as like the change. I never had any factual information about it. I didn't know what to expect. So I think as products like Simply Timeless come out, I think we're able to open up the conversation a little bit more. I think if your partner is experiencing perimenopause, read up on it a little bit. Some of the things that go along with perimenopause are pretty severe, and the people who are experiencing them can be pretty confused about it. Like they don't know what's happening to their bodies. So give them time and understand that it's not you, generally. It's not you. The first thing I ever used for lube, I was too young to walk into a sex store. And it was a hair product that was silicone based, which might explain why my preference is for a silicone lube.
Yeah. But
I think a lot of people who are comfortable walking into adult stores are maybe a bit more experimental. They are comfortable using lube and they're not so worried about the stigma. And then, of course, you get the people, oh, that's for old people. Oh, that's for people with problems. Or if my partner was doing their job, I wouldn't need lube or things like that. And so we're just continuously working to dispel those myths to get rid of the lube stigma and to reassure people like lube reduces friction and it increases pleasure.
Right.
That's the main function of lube. For anal sex, it isn't possible unless you have lube. And some people are trying to use spit or different things. There's a lot of bacteria in spit. Some people are trying to use different household products for different things. That's not great either. We're fighting that thing where people will come to me and they'll say, oh yeah, I've just got a big jar of coconut oil and we use that when we need extra lube. And I just think of like dirty paws being dipped into that jar time and time again. I find that flavored lube is a really great, what we call the gateway lube. Yeah. Because flavored lube is fun and it's playful and it's something that a couple can do together. And then that sort of gives way to other possibilities.
I think you're right. It also takes away, like, say a partner is noticing that their partner is drier than usual. If they're bringing in a flavored lube, it's not because they're saying you're dry. It's like, I want to try this flavored lube because I think that will be fun for oral. And it really takes off the pressure of being like, because you need it. So that is such a good suggestion, like incredible suggestion. Can you tell everybody who is maybe interested in learning more about perimenopause, some of the resources that you provide, and where they can find you, all of that information?
Yeah, absolutely. So Wicked Sensual Care actually has a menopause hub. So if you go to wickedsensualcare.com, we have a hub where you can find all different kinds of information. Also, Heather Karina wrote an amazing book called What in the Fresh Hell Is This? I think it's a fantastic read. Joan Price talks a lot about sex and aging. And Joan's work is very useful because she's been doing it for a very long time. I think Joan's work is very important. Joan is our first Simply Timeless ambassador. And she does speak for and to the senior community when it comes to sex and aging. Joan and I also have a monthly IG live called Your Body's Changing, where we talk about perimenopause, menopause, and beyond, senior sex, and we talk about dating, and we talk about all the different ways that our bodies change. We always take questions and comments. We have people DM us, and we have people chat with us live when we do the lives once a month. So those are all places that I would direct people to. And I just think that it's super important that we continue to have the conversation, because I find that when I'm training people in retail spaces that are carrying the product, and Timeless is the first line for people experiencing perimenopause, menopause, and beyond, what the retail staff often tells me is that they feel like there are two barriers when people are sort of at that stage, maybe don't know it yet. One barrier is store staff being not knowledgeable enough or not comfortable enough saying the word menopause, and just having all of the information and education. So I think information and education is super important. And then the other barrier is just the stigma. And we know that when there's a stigma, it's usually because people are just not informed. Like they don't have enough information about something. So we'll just continue to educate people and fight that stigma surrounding particularly perimenopause and menopause.
We would be remiss to say, or not to say, I guess, how does that saying work? Remiss to say, remiss not to say? Anyways, it'd be silly for us not to mention, because we're super proud of this, that at lovetem.com, we are also promoting and selling your product line and working alongside you in diminishing or exploding this idea conceptually that menopause is a negative thing. We all know it happens. It happens to 50% of the population. There's nothing to be wronged about. There's no morality around it. It's nature. It's human beings. We experience this. And then on the other side of it, there's this massive opportunity for us as men and for partners of women who are going through this to be very supportive during these stages. And I'm just so happy that you are a voice for this community. I'm so proud that we are working alongside you in expanding this conversation. This is the important work that gets to normalize human beings and sexuality. I love the conversation around lubricant and not making it wrong. Our job in sex is to have pleasure and to experience pleasure in a relationship with our partners. If it's painful, if it doesn't feel the way that it used to feel, it's okay to talk about it. And you should talk about it, because the goal ultimately is connection. The goal ultimately is fulfillment. And if we are not connected and we are not fulfilled, why are we doing this? And it will only lead to resentment down the road. And so I love that you're doing this. I'm so proud of the work that you're doing. I'm so proud that we're a very small part of the work that you're doing. And I just cannot wait to expand this conversation and get it into more homes and into more communities, and to make this a normal conversation for people to have with their friends around the fireside chats. Thank you so much for doing the heavy lifting. Thank you. Thank you
for having me. I'm looking so forward to doing more work with y'all. And I think we also need to get to a point where we're comfortable talking about the changes that men's bodies go through too, because that's going to be a big part of this conversation down the line. Men experience the same types of hormone fluctuations and body changes. It's just in society, men age more gracefully and women have it harder. So
You do. And I will fully acknowledge that.
We're going to get into menopause next time.
Yes.
I love it.
100%.
Jessica, thank you so much. Truly appreciate it. I will let Brittany.
I could talk to you all day, so I'm going to respectfully shut up and just say thank you. We really appreciate your time.
Awesome.
We should do this again, y'all. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yes, we will, for sure.
Bye.
There goes a sight from my soul.